This is chapter 24. When Peter came into the kitchen, he found Vola already drinking coffee. She couldn't have slept any more than he had. He heard her leave for the barn in the middle of the night, and she hadn't come back until nearly dawn. She raised her mug. "Breakfast before you go?" He shook his head. Vola nodded and took his pack from him. She stuffed a brown paper bag. She stuffed a brown paper bag into it. "Eat the ham sandwiches first. Ham won't keep. There's a jar of salve. Put it on twice a day. I filled your thermos, but you'll have to be on the lookout for springs. Keep that cast dry, though. I mean it. Tape a garbage bag around it if it rains." She set the pack down, and Peter noticed she had 2 shoes on. "Hey, you're wearing it." She lifted her overall cuff. "Condition number 1. "Wow," Peter managed after 1 minute. "Holy diable man. Where's the old one?" Vola tipped her head to the armchair. "I don't know what to do with it. Maybe put it on the scarecrow?" "Not on the scarecrow," Peter answered, instantly sure. He pointed to the fireplace. "The phoenix, remember? All his stuff burns in the nest." Vola sighed, but she followed him. Peter stirred the embers and added some kindling. Vola brought the wooden post over. It looked smaller somehow. The leather straps reminded Peter of the ones binding the marionette's hands and feet. "You okay?" "I'm okay." Vola placed a wooden leg onto the flames, and both of them washed until it caught. Vola walked away first. Peter noticed how smooth her gait was with the prosthesis. You wouldn't even guess. He pulled the screen over the fire. When she got home today, there'd be nothing but a pile of ashes. "You okay with the other 2 conditions?" he asked, trailing her to the kitchen. "We'll find out at the library, but I loaded the tractor already." "The tractor?" "Well, how else are we going to cart 20 marionettes into town?" "We're driving to the library on a tractor?" "We're driving to the library on a tractor. Unless you got a magic carpet you haven't told me about. And we have to leave soon to make that bus, so you ready?" "Yeah, I've got everything I need." "Well, not quite, you don't." She reached behind the door and drew out something that surprised Peter so much he couldn't respond. "You know what this is, right?" The baseball bat was turned perfectly smooth, the weight so solid and balanced that the world seemed to slow as he hefted it. "You made this, but I don't need—" "Oh, I think you do. Maybe when you get where you're going, you'll figure out why." Peter ached to hand the bat back, but Vola had stayed up late last night carving it for him, and she looked so proud. Maybe it was time to own one again. He balanced on his crutches and took a slow motion swing. And the other bad memory swept him. His 7-year-old fury, a wildness he couldn't control, the exhilarating fright of that wildness, his mother's blue gazing globe, batted off its pedestal into a million shards, her tears. "You've got to tame that temper. Don't be like him." Her bloodied fingers picking the blue glass daggers from her white roses. His shame as he watched her drive away. He slid the bat into his pack where it fit, as though it had always had a place there. Treacherous. He hoisted the pack, and underneath was the newspaper clipping. He picked it up, and his eye caught the date. He crumpled to the chair, gut-kicked. What? He knew! Peter shoved the clipping across the table. "He knew! This is 12 days old, so my father knew this when we left Pax." It hurt to take a breath, like knives to his lungs. "When I asked to leave Pax on that old mill road because it would be safe, he knew." Peter's hands burned. He looked down. They were balled into tight fists. He forced them open. How could he have done that? Vola came over, eyeing him carefully. I'm sorry. That's a very bad thing." His jaw clenched. Could teeth shatter? He forced it open. "How could anyone have done that? I know you're angry." Peter's fist had balled up again, the nails gouging his sore palms. He jammed them between his knees. "No, I told you I don't get angry. I'm not like him. I won't be like him." Vola sat down across from him. Oh, I see. I see now. But I don't think that's going to work out. You're human, and humans feel anger. Not me. Too dangerous. Vola threw her head back and barked her startling laugh. Oh, let me tell you, feelings are all dangerous. Love, hope. Ha! Hope. Talk about dangerous, huh? No, you can't avoid any of them. We all own a beast called anger. It can serve us. Many good things come out of anger at bad things. Many unjust things are made just. But first, we have to figure out how to civilize it. Peter felt his wiring begin to snap. Just one time. Could you not tell me I had to figure something out? Just once! Would it kill you to help? Come on, I'm leaving. You've got all this. He waved his hand up to the bulletin board. This wisdom. Would it kill you to send me off with some advice? What? You want me to give you a philosophy bingo card for your trip? Like, when you smell honey in the woods, run, 'cause bear can't be far behind. Yeah, I guess, but for real. Well, for real. I don't have any magic truth to guide you. It's your trip, not mine. But now that you bring it up, I do have a card for you. She pulled one off the board and handed it over. It's blank. I know, it is now, but a trip like this, you'll find something to fill it with. A truth of your own that you discover on your own. At that, Peter felt suddenly exhausted, as if he'd been holding himself rigid for years. He'd been on his own for so long. Vola studied him. Oneness is always growing in the world, boy. Two, but not two. It's always there, connecting its roots, humming. I can't be part of it. That's the price I pay for taking myself away. But you can be. You can vibrate with its heartbeat. You may be on your own, but you won't be alone. What if I get lost? You will not get lost. I think maybe I already am. Vola reached across the table, cupped his head, and pressed. No, you are found. She got up, and Peter felt her brush a kiss on his hair as she passed. The tractor was not actually that uncomfortable, but it was slow and bumpy and loud, too loud for them to talk easily, even though Peter was sitting right next to Vola. That was okay with him. He had a lot to think about. Even after they turned onto a smoother highway shoulder, Vola was quiet, and Peter figured she had things on her mind, too. But she pointed at a hawk wheeling overhead. He remembered something he'd always wanted to ask. What is about you and birds? The feathers. Vola patted the feathers on her rawhide necklace and smiled. T-pole. When I was born, I reminded my parents of a bird. My hair stuck up like feathers, I had a scrawny neck, I squawked for food all the time. I'm part Creole, part Indian, and part a dozen other things, but all people who revered birds in their cultures, my parents realized. So they named me Vola. It means fly in Italian, but they called me T-pole, little chicken. My chickens grace me with feathers, and I wear them to remember that when I was born, someone saw me as a bird. That's all. Not much of a story. But it was a good story, Peter thought, and it explained the look she always got in her face when she lifted the rope. It would be the hardest for her to give away. He looked behind him at the 4 crude pine crates the marionettes were packed in, strapped to the back. Peter hoped they didn't remind Vola of coffins. Her amazing puppets were really going to live now, really live out in the real world, not to just exist, to perform some sort of penance. And maybe Vola would too, but maybe that was too much to ask. He was still wondering about that when the tractor sputtered up to a stop in the library parking lot, hunkering over 3 places. Vola climbed down and hoisted one of the boxes. Peter followed her, but at the wide brick steps, he stopped and tapped Vola's shoulder. You know, he whispered, you have to be a little careful in there. Careful? About language, you know? Vola looked at him blankly. He was going to have to spell it out for her. It isn't the kind of place where people say diable man a lot. Oh, please, I think I know that, boy. Her tone was withering, but it was with a hint of a grin. Peter opened the door and swept her through. Librarian looked like a tossful handfuls of jewels. Bright coral scarf, gold silk blouse, sapphire blue skirt. She smiled as Vola came in and set her crate on the table. And when the top was lifted, her mouth fell into a perfect O. Peter remembered he'd been speechless too, the first time he'd seen those puppets. He backed out the door to give Vola some privacy. The morning's clouds had lifted, and the sky was so bright that it hurt his eyes. The sound seemed brighter than usual too, or maybe it's just because it had been so quiet this past week. A barking dog, 2 women chatting, bike brakes squealing, children shrieking in a playground beside the parking lot. He had missed these sounds. He had missed the world. He wondered if Vola missed it all at all. Bleh. He wondered if Vola missed it all the time. He headed over to watch the little kids for a few minutes. Most of them were tearing around, jumping onto and off benches, and slapping the swings into some made-up game. A frowning girl with a straw-colored ponytail was digging by herself in the sandbox, earnestly moving shovelful after shovelful from one pile to another. Sitting in the sandbox corner, looking bored, with his head propped in a baseball glove, was a boy in a faded red t-shirt. The shortstop. From the ball practice. Peter moved closer. "Hey!" The boy looked up, then stood as if readying for a fight. He nodded at Peter's crutches. "I wondered why you didn't show." "How'd you do?" The shortstop scoffed. "Pfft, like you don't know you creamed us." He took the little girl's shovel and handed her a pink sweatshirt. "Come on, let's go home." "Wait!" Peter felt a crazy rising panic. Maybe being a hermit for a week had made him weird already. But the boy was lifting his sister out of the sandbox as if they were going to leave, and he couldn't let that happen yet. "Wait! You know when you're on the field and you know what you're supposed to do and you're ready? When the game's about to start and the glove turns into part of your hand and you know exactly that you're exactly where you should be? That feeling? Do you think that's peace?" The boy scowled at Peter, and he shook his head as if he wanted to shake off the whole encounter, and then he started walking away, pulling his sister by the hand. Peter could only watch as they left the playground, feeling that something valuable had just slipped away. At the gate, though, the shortstop turned. He was pretty far away, but it looked like maybe he wasn't frowning anymore. He lifted a hand and shot up 2 fingers up in a peace sign. Peter lifted his own fingers back. Inside, the librarian was unpacking the last crate. 6 kids had materialized, and they gasped and grinned as she lifted out each marionette. Vola stood off to the side watching. She turned to leave when she caught sight of Peter. Peter stabbed a crutch out to block her. "Condition number 3?" He asked with a glance back to the librarian. Vola gave him the look that was half irritation, half grudging defeat. She turned back to the librarian. "I forgot to say, B, that I will come back once a week to teach the kids how to use them." B. Booker smiled, a slow smile that reminded Peter of melted caramel. "That would be awfully nice." Vola set out for the door, but Peter blocked her path again. Vola threw her palms up. "What now?" He raised 2 fingers. "What? Oh, fine." She walked back to the table. "B, twice a week. I will come twice a week. Teach the kids." Librarian broke out into a wide grin. "The children would love that. Be good to see you more too, Vola. Maybe we could go for coffee afterward." The little girl with a fountain of beaded pigtails tugged on Vola's overalls. She pointed to the elephant. "How do you make him dance?" she demanded. Peter held his breath. But instead of lecturing the girl about figuring things out for herself, Vola crouched down to study the elephant. Peter noticed that the movement was smoother with the prosthesis. She had an ankle joint now, such a simple thing to be able to flex. How much she had given up. "What makes you think he wants to dance?" Vola said. "Red toenails like mine." The little girl wiggled her toes in her sandals. Then her hand drifted up to stroke the feathers at Vola's neck. Vola startled at the touch, and Peter held his breath. But she only reached out and patted the girl's own necklace of yellow pop beads. Then she pointed to the clock over the desk, which read almost 11. "I got something important to do right now, but I'll be back in half hour. If you're still here, we'll figure out how to make him dance." I'll see you in the next video to finish up.